matters this morning. If you have them, give us your thoughts, give us your opinions on it. We're going to talk now, though, about another element of the housing crisis, and this is the issue of the short-term rents register, which is soon to come into force. There are still questions as well about the planning side of things in terms of Airbnb, bookings.com, short-term lettings in general, and the drive from government with this policy to try and get people into long-term letting. Well, EU Tourism Task Force member and Fianna Fáil MEP for Ireland South, Cynthia Varaku, has called on the Department of Housing to provide clarity on what role planning will play. And she's with me on the line. Cynthia, good morning to you.
More quite to imagine. Delighted to speak with you.
Now, what are you looking for the government to provide clarity on? We're 8 weeks away from the register being set up, but we still don't know exactly what's happening with regards to planning.
That's exactly it. Now, first of all, I want to say that I support every effort being made by Minister James Brown and the department in relation to solving the housing crisis. And we do have to look at everything, but I think we have to look with a common sense approach and a logical approach. So I don't want this aspect of trying to solve the housing crisis and making sure that the short-term lets turn into long-term rentals for people who are desperate to get rentals. I don't want this to turn into another problem created and a disaster, quite frankly, for our tourism industry.
Okay, and how do we avoid that, I suppose, is the question. Number one, the register will do one thing if everyone plays ball with it. That will, for the first time, we'll know how many we have in the country and where they're located. But on the other hand, the planning is a bit of a mess.
Yeah, I've absolutely no difficulty finding out about data and registry and who's registered and what way is property being used and what way can it be used differently depending on the density of usage in an area. All of that data is vital to solve our housing problem. But the difficulty is this. Let me take a concrete example. So I spent the weekend in Kerry. I'm just en route now to Limerick because this is the constituency week for me to get around. And after Limerick, I'll go on to Clare. So I was in Phoenix outside of Tralee, spent a good deal of time on that peninsula, and from Tralee town all the way out to Clahan, which is a lovely long stretch of tourism amenity areas where we want all our tourists coming in, domestic and foreign, there is no hotel. And so there are a large number of short-term lets. Now, I spoke to a good few owners of these short-term lets. I've already spoken to them, I suppose, on the phone and emails and so forth, but in person. And really, they are absolutely confused, bewildered, and quite frankly, under huge pressure because they just don't know, and it hasn't been clarified by the Department of Housing as to whether or not on the 20th of May, by the 20th of May this year, which is looming large, that they have to have applied for planning permission with all the incumbent costs.
Well, I tell you one thing, and not being flippant about it, but I can guarantee you that the whole thing is not going to work in terms of the planning side of it. Because if every single short-term let that registers has to apply for planning, there'll be no way planning departments can cope with the numbers involved to make a decision. So everyone for this season, I can't imagine inspectors turning up on your door saying you have to close down.
No, but that's the point is, yes, but the point is that none of these short-term letters, the owners of the short-term lets, none of them want to break the law. None of them want to risk being prosecuted at a later date. So they need to know, where are we going? Do we continue to open our doors without planning permission and offer our facilities, which are much needed by tourists? And I mean, the offering is fantastic, not only in that part of the country, but around the country where we've short-term lets. And our tourism industry is really important from the point of view of GDP and so forth. So they need to know with clarity what is happening. Now, it's not just the owners of these short-term lets. Could I stress that there are ancillary services totally dependent on them, whether they are amenities such as surfing or inflatable hurdy-gurdies for the children and so forth, or whether it's actually a laundrette, or whether it's a local bar. I mean, I was in a lovely place.
There's a number of companies involved in managing these properties for people as well, who provide a lot of employment in rural areas.
Service providers. But just let's take real people. I mean, Sheila Maloney is running Tamashins, a beautiful, beautiful pub, her family pub, and she's recently taken it over, offering a wonderful menu, wonderful welcome, wonderful beverages. And she is obviously dependent on the tourists coming out that road. Now, she's building it up with her rural population and neighbours around her as well. Another lady that I met in a different business, Justine, she runs a laundrette called the beach box. She's dependent on the short-term let occupants that come and get all their washing and their laundry done. So there's lots of businesses here that's providing not only money for the short-term lets, but also for the dependent businesses around it. And dare I say it, students who are paying their fees in college, local students who are working in these facilities.
Yeah, Cynthia, this comes from an EU regulation, of course. This is a regulation which was adopted by the European Parliament to, across Europe, an EU-wide system to register short-term rentals.
Yes.
Then everyone knows where everyone is.
Yes, of course. And the short-term letters and myself all agree with the register. We all want the data. The complicating factor here is, and just to focus on one thing, it's planning. So the planning was bolted on or latched on by our government in an undefined or ill-defined or no definition way. And that's what's causing the confusion. And in fairness to these people who own the short-term lets, they have been asking for that clarity for a long time and they still haven't got it. So really we're at the 11th hour now. And as I say, I think when I looked at the directive from Europe, I saw that they did not bolt on a necessity for planning because obviously planning is left up to every national authority. Every national authority then trickles down to the local county council. And so therefore it was up to the national government and obviously the local county council working together to make it clear as to what planning regulations or application would be required. Look, tourism is of critical importance to the Irish economy. I've said that already. There's 228,000 jobs. There's 6 billion of an income to our economy in 2024. And getting back then to the local planning application and not focusing so much, I suppose, on the short-term letters and the costs they be put to. Kerry County Council, let's just focus on that. I got some data before and it's actually quite difficult, and I can give you the figures if you want. It's quite difficult to get planning permission from Kerry County Council for tourism accommodation. So where are these tourists going to stay? We don't have enough hotels in Kerry, let alone in other tourist hotspots and counties and areas in the country.
Yeah, that's the question. The other question is, what are the new regulations going to be in terms of planning for them? We were promised clarity. We still don't have it. It's the 20th of May. Is now the time for the Department of Housing to make a clear statement on this and to say how it's going to work? Because it can't wait any longer, surely.
Yes, exactly. And the obvious statement would be to say there is an amnesty for the moment and then come with the clarity if they do need more time to think about it, to design the rules, the regulations or whatever. But for goodness sake, the tourist season is well on the way now. St. Patrick's Day is well over. And as I say, I spent the weekend in Tralee. It was thriving. Pleased to say there was a lot of tourists around, a lot of activity. But, I mean, there are people that are coming that won't get a hotel room and they won't be able to afford a hotel room in Tralee, even though there's a wonderful offering. And they want to come out the road. They want to avail of the Wild Atlantic Way, like we all did with our kids. I did it myself. I travelled up and down the Wild Atlantic Way and I stayed in short-term lets and B&Bs. And of course, we know that the amount of B&Bs are just reducing and reducing. I mean, that is an ageing out type of business, so to speak. And what has replaced it now is the short-term lets.
Okay. All right, Cynthia, listen, we'll see what happens with that. That's your call. You're calling for an amnesty. You're calling for information as soon as possible from the Minister for Housing. But thanks for talking to us on the programme this morning. Cynthia, well, that's indeed Cynthia Veracouslan to you. And thanks very much for talking to us on the programme. Cynthia is on the EU Tourism Task Force. And also, she is an Ireland South MEP that is looking for that clarity, and I suppose it's what everyone's been looking for and what the industry have been looking for really for the last year and a half. So we'll see what happens. If you have a view on that, get in touch with us in the programme. The clarity would be welcome.